Again, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm happy to be here and fill in for Brooke. I'm going to talk a little bit about Georgian Bay Forever and a couple of our projects, and then I will move on to kind of focusing on shoreline cleanups, how we do them, and what they involved. So Georgian Bay Forever, in case you haven't heard of us, we are a charity dedicated to scientific research and public education on Georgian Bay's aquatic ecosystems. Our mission is to protect, enhance, and restore the aquatic ecosystem of Georgian Bay by funding accredited research on water levels, water quality, and ecosystems. We currently are working from Tobermory all the way around to Point of Barrel on a variety of different projects that impact our drinking and recreational waters. As I mentioned today, I'm going to touch on a few projects that we are working on that focus on pollution, specifically plastic pollution, and then touch on shoreline cleanups. Hopefully there isn't too much overlap. I don't know how many of you have heard Brooke's presentation before, but hopefully there's new information here as well. So as we all know, plastic pollution in our waterways is a huge global issue, both macro pollution and micro pollution. There are some 8 million metric tons of plastic that enters our oceans yearly, collecting in ocean gyres due to ocean currents and wind. You may be familiar with some like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch as an example. Unfortunately, plastic pollution obviously is a huge issue in the Great Lakes as well. And according to one study from RIT, approximately 10,000 tons of plastic pollution enters the Great Lakes every year. And in fact, some of the concentrations of plastics in Great Lakes surface water are the highest in the world, with some concentrations being as high as or even higher than some of the garbage patches in the ocean. And this is really alarming, and it mostly has to do with microplastics. And researchers have reported microplastic contamination in Great Lakes surface waters, sediments, and pretty much in every Great Lakes wildlife species that they have examined. And unfortunately, wildlife aren't the only creatures eating this plastic. We eat it as well. And it's estimated that humans eat about a credit card's amount of plastic every single week. This comes from both bottled water, tap water, beer, salt, shellfish, and much more other sources. And with millions of people living around and using the Great Lakes, we are unfortunately contributing to this plastic pollution problem. And one of our current projects that I'll just touch on, this is Brooke's project, is working to capture pollution, specifically microplastic and microfiber pollution. And this is the Divert and Capture Collingwood project. And just for anyone who's not familiar with what microplastics are, these are just pieces of plastic that are less than 5 millimeters in size. So they can be small fragments from what used to be a larger piece of plastic. They can be fibers, which shed from our clothing if we're wearing synthetic fibers, as well as nurdles, which are small pieces of plastic. They're also called mermaid tears. They're small little pieces the size of a lentil. And those are used to create bigger pieces of plastic. So the goals of this project include physically diverting microplastics from entering our water at the source, and the source is our washing machines. Studies show that some 700,000 microfibers can actually be shed from our laundry just doing one load of laundry. So these filters, as you can see on the screen here, are created to capture that microfiber and microplastic pollution and prevent it from going into our waterways. We're also engaging the community with hands-on shoreline cleanups, as I will talk about a little bit later, and working to provide the public with information on microplastics and practical tips to reduce our plastic consumption. If you live in Collingwood and are interested in getting a free filter installed on your washing machine and participating in this project, you can email Brooke Harrison. I have her email on the last slide in this presentation. There's a few things you need to meet in order to qualify to be included in this project, which is being connected to Collingwood Town Water and using your washing machine year round. having space for the filter. So you can see from the photo, it's about the size of a vertical paper towel roll. So there just needs to be room for the plumber to install that. And we ask that you're willing to participate in the project, which just includes a couple surveys, as well as emptying the filter bag every 2 to 3 weeks and storing it in your fridge or freezer. We usually suggest freezer until someone from GBF can come and pick it up, and we will weigh and sample those collections that you make for us. And then another project, this is my project, Diversion 2.0. This project is a little more focused on the macro pollution side of plastic pollution, but so we're installing different waste capturing devices all around Georgian Bay, and this is to prevent and remove plastic pollution from Georgian Bay. The first device that we're installing 8 of is the sea bins. It's the first picture on the left. Sea bins are basically floating garbage bins that collect pollution and debris down to 2 millimeters in size in a 20 kilogram catch bag. So this does require power to work, and it has a small motor that just pulls water through the device and captures pollution in the bag. The gutter bin is installed at the storm drain opening. So sorry, I should have included another photo, but it's installed below that storm grate. And it is basically a giant bag that hangs within the storm grate. And as water pushes debris through the grates and into the stormwater system, it captures it in a bag that then can be removed and emptied. And then lastly, we are installing 2 trash traps. These are installed at the stormwater outfall pipe, so at the very end where we would see the water either entering a stormwater retention pond or even moving just directly into the bay. And that's able to capture pollution and debris that's 25 millimeters or larger. These devices are maintained by our wonderful partners on this Diversion 2.0 project, and we are also conducting deep dive waste characterizations on them to learn more about the types of pollution that are in the bay and that are going into the bay. And I'll talk a little bit more about the importance of identifying our types of pollution that we're finding as I move into shoreline cleanups. Okay, so now on to shoreline cleanups. So here are some pictures from the Wasaga Beach shoreline cleanups that we have had this summer. So I will kind of touch on how we run a shoreline cleanup and then what's needed to make a shoreline cleanup successful. Normally when guests arrive, we have kind of a tent setup area where we can greet them and have them sign just like a safety waiver. In previous summers, we would usually have people gather in a group at the start time so that we could give some announcements about who we are, GBF, the importance of doing shoreline cleanups and how to do them. This summer with COVID, we had more of just kind of a rolling start time for a lot of the shoreline cleanups. So people just came when they were available. Staff and volunteers would walk them through the process of a shoreline cleanup and then send them on their way to start collecting pollution and debris. And then they would bring back their bags when they were done. I think either works fine depending on when volunteers are showing up. On the right here, you'll see what we use as our tally sheet. So we give these tally sheets to all volunteers that are willing to take one. It's not mandatory that everyone fill out a data sheet, but the more that do collect this information for us, the better. But of course, the most important thing is just getting as much pollution off the shoreline as possible. And as volunteers, I said, return to the table, we take their tally sheets, and then we have like a running Excel sheet so that we can see everything that has been collected and tallied, including weights and amount of area covered for the whole summer. Another way to do shoreline cleanups that we have done, I think just 2 times so far this summer, one in Wasaga Beach and one in Collingwood, is doing a waste characterization shoreline cleanup. And so with this style of shoreline cleanup, instead of asking volunteers to carry a tally sheet with them, we just send them out with a bag or bucket to do the collection along the shoreline. And then they bring it back and other volunteers start to sort it. So you can see from these photos, we're getting piles of everything that has been collected by volunteers. And these are some of our wonderful summer staff that have been doing all the shoreline cleanups this summer. I would say this process takes a little bit longer than a classic shoreline cleanup of having people do the tallying themselves. But what I do like about a waste characterization is it gives really strong visuals to tell a story. As you can see in these photos, it's really alarming to look at the pile of cigarette butts and the piles of plastic fragments. Of course, if it's a windy day, this might not be the best style of shoreline cleanup to do, but you can kind of go with the flow and see what the day is going to be like and just judge if you want to do a regular shoreline cleanup or a waste characterization style shoreline cleanup based on what the weather is going to be like. So here's just some more photos that I know that we will use to tell stories in our social media and provide educational information. And I did actually just check our shoreline Excel document so that I could give you guys some numbers. So this is just a couple stats from the Wasaga Beach shoreline cleanup this week. So volunteers collected 15 beverage cans, 193 bottle caps, 635 cigarette butts, 92 food wrappers, 153 pieces of like paper and receipt, 600 pieces of plastic fragments, 65 bread clips, which I thought was really weird, and 35 straws. And that is not the complete list at all. There is so much more that they were able to collect. So as I mentioned, keeping tally of the pollution collected is important, and this is why. So knowing the types of pollution that is being collected is going to help us plan on how we can reduce it. We need to know what needs to be reduced in order to reduce it. And so, for example, in 2019, the majority of the pollution that we were finding in shoreline cleanups was unencapsulated polystyrene, which is also known as dock foam, which is the blue, usually blue foam holding up our floating docks. And you can see from the picture on the left that there was a lot of big chunks, but there was greater than 5,000 pieces in total, and probably more than that collected over 2019. And anyone that has handled dock foam before knows how easily it disintegrates. It breaks off into pieces very easily, and it also breaks down from wave action, sunlight, and wildlife. So knowing this information in 2019, how big of an issue dock foam was, we knew we needed to take action. And so in 2019, we started a dock foam committee and commissioned Lisa Erdl from U of T to develop the report. Is there a report on my screen? Yes, to develop this report. And the committee met with manufacturers to listen about alternative to dock foams, educate people about dock foam, and learn about different ways that we could avoid using dock foam. And we also communicated with MPP Norm Miller, which led to Bill 228. And Bill 228 is called Keeping Polystyrene Out of Ontario's Lakes and Rivers Act. And this is a private member's bill that is designed to address the plastic pollution caused by dock foam. So it had its third reading on May 13th, and then back on May 20th, the bill actually passed, which is very exciting. So in the future, we will not see dock foam being used or unencapsulated dock foam being used. And so this story right here is just proof of how shoreline cleanups and collecting a tally of the types of pollution that we're finding can do more than, just keep our beaches clean. We can try and reduce the need to keep our beaches clean by reducing the amount of pollution going into our waterways. So a little bit just about planning shoreline cleanups. While shoreline cleanups seem relatively easy to plan, and on the day of, they usually are, there is quite a bit of planning that just goes on beforehand to make sure that they are highly successful. And these are just some of kind of the high level aspects to think of when you're planning a shoreline cleanup. so that it is successful. So obviously, first, where are you going to do the shoreline cleanup? Is it in an area that is easy to find easy for volunteers to find and get to? Is it in an area that has a lot of pollution, or do we need to kind of migrate to different areas within a community to hit multiple beaches at a time? How often are you going to do it? Is it going to be every week like we do in Collingwood, or every few weeks like in Wasaga? Or maybe monthly? And another important thing to consider is how much area are you going to cover during the shoreline cleanup on that day? We like to keep record just to show, we found this many pieces of plastic over, a 300-meter area or something along those lines. A big thing to consider is, what are you going to do with all of the pollution that you have after it's been collected and bagged? We usually communicate with the municipalities, and they've been really great at picking up those bagged pollution for us. When you are bagging and tying up and getting ready to get rid of the trash, if there are pieces that can be recycled, that's wonderful. Please, pull them out and recycle them. But unfortunately, a lot of the plastic that you find during shoreline cleanups is really contaminated and dirty. And unfortunately, really dirty pieces and fragmented pieces of plastic that are unidentifiable, those cannot be recycled. And so they will be sent to landfill. And then next is how are you going to get the word out? How are you going to recruit volunteers to come and help you? And GBF, we use a lot of social media and a lot of emailing to different groups and schools to try and get them to also send the word out. And of course, word of mouth works well too. And GBF, we're in a lot of communities around Georgian Bay, and we are absolutely willing to assist with recruitment and advertising for any cleanups that you might be organizing. Another thing to consider is just if there are any other environmental groups in your area that might be interested in joining and assisting. And I'd even recommend reaching out to local restaurants and stores, ones that are, openly eco-friendly or maybe not, but working on it, that might be interested in joining and helping to promote cleaning up our shorelines and join in the activity. And lastly, just some of the equipment to think about when you are organizing shoreline cleanups. Garbage bags or buckets for volunteers to carry the plastic that they're collecting in, as well as gloves. And we have kind of picker uppers that are a little trigger that you pull and it picks it up on the bottom like a garbage picker. I'm not sure what else to call that. But garbage pickers, you know what I'm talking about. As well as sharps containers. I don't think we've found many or any needles this summer, but glass is definitely a big one. And so if there is glass, we usually will go pick it up ourselves. We don't encourage volunteers to pick it up. We can put on a pair of, thicker gloves and go out with a sharps container and pick that glass up for them. So that a glass container is definitely important to have. You will run into glass. And then clipboards and tally sheets and pens so that it is easy and convenient for our volunteers to tally that information for us. And we like to also keep a luggage scale or even a fish scale just to weigh the amount of debris that we have collected at the end of the shoreline cleanup. So that is kind of all I have, but I just wanted to end with this image that I really like, because plastic is in so many of our lives, and it's allowed us to accomplish a lot of great things throughout, humankind since the development of plastic. But reducing single-use plastic and reducing plastic pollution is so important, but it's overwhelming. There's a lot that needs to be done, and I feel overwhelmed when I look at this picture. But I want to encourage you all, obviously, along with shoreline cleanups, to work to reduce your plastic consumption in your own life and with your family and with your community. And ways to do that include being a conscious consumer. Start in one room of your house and look at the plastics that you might be using. Do you need to use them? Do you need to buy those? Are there maybe more sustainable alternatives or just ways that you could cut it out? Simply buying less and avoiding fast fashion are great ways to reduce our plastic consumption and consumption in general, as well as supporting local and buying sustainable products, repurposing our clothes and repairing our items. I'll say the journey to reducing our plastic consumption or even going all the way to being plastic free is complicated and it's busy and it's difficult, just like this image. But no one's perfectly plastic free that I know of. So there's always room to improve. And I encourage you all to be imperfectly plastic free together so that we can all, have that common goal of reducing our plastic consumption and reducing plastic pollution. And with that, thank you all so much for having me. Here is Brooke Harrison's email if you want to learn more about the shoreline cleanups as well as the filter project. And if there's any questions as well about Diversion 2.0, where we're installing the waste capturing devices, feel free to email me.